Hello, OT amplifiers, and welcome to this episode of the Amplify OT podcast. This episode is a little bit different because I am interviewing the individuals who are running for President-elect of AOTA and Vice President of AOTA. These are elected board positions for AOTA, and elections are opening on February 2nd of 2024 and close on February 23rd of 2024. Because there were so many candidates and they had such fantastic things to say, we have actually broken up these interviews into 3 separate podcast episodes. 2 episodes are dedicated to President-elect, and 1 episode is dedicated to the Vice President. Now, I do want to make it super clear that there is absolutely no rhyme or reason as to why certain folks were grouped together or what order they appear in. I also want to make sure it's clear that I, myself, and Amplify OT are not endorsing any specific candidate. I think all of them have such an interesting perspective to bring to the position, and it's really going to be a tough choice. So I encourage you to listen to all the different interviews and hear the different perspectives, but also hear where they overlap in mission. For AOTA President-elect interviews, you will be hearing from Karen Sames, Michael Pizzi, Vikram Pagpatan, and Arameh Anvarizadeh. For Vice President, you will hear from Natalie Chang-Wright and Christina Reyes. And I just want to say that I am so grateful that all of them agreed to participate in this project and that they are willing to put forward their time to support our profession for the better. There are numerous reasons to participate in this election, not only because we're voting for President-elect and the Vice President, but there are also 4 individuals running for open positions on the board of directors. Now, unfortunately, many of these positions run unopposed. And while it's fantastic to see individuals who are getting involved and are willing to serve our profession, it's always great to have a choice. It's also unfortunate that for some positions, there were no nominations received, such as the Mental Health Special Interest Section Chairperson, the Home and Community Health Special Interest Section Chairperson, and the OTA Representative-elect to the Representative Assembly. Unfortunately, there were no RA nominations received in Alabama, Connecticut, Georgia, Illinois, Kansas, Maryland, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Wisconsin. So if you live in any of those states and you're an AOTA member, I highly encourage you to consider running for the Representative Assembly so that you can represent the interests and beliefs of your state. A few years ago, AOTA put out statistics saying that on average, only 4% of AOTA members vote in AOTA elections. We need to make that change. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into these interviews, and I can't wait to hear your perspectives. Our next interview is with Dr. Arameh Anvarizadeh. She is an innovative leader and associate professor of clinical occupational therapy at the USC Mrs. T.H. Chan Division of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy. As the former director of admissions, she implemented a holistic admissions process, resulting in the most diverse cohorts in USC Chan. Dr. Anvarizadeh is a trailblazer, serving as the youngest and first Black and Iranian woman to be vice president of AOTA, and the first Black and Iranian woman to be inducted into the prestigious roster of fellows, or FAOTA. She is aiming to make history again by running for AOTA president. Dr. Anvarizadeh is a founding member and former chair of the Coalition of Occupational Therapy Advocates for Diversity, or COTAD. She spearheaded initiatives for justice, equity, diversion, inclusion, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. As a prolific author and speaker, she has contributed significantly to the field, emphasizing the importance of inclusion and empowerment. Dr. Anvarizadeh is committed to building sustainable, healthy, diverse communities and continues to inspire others to reach their maximum potential. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Anvarizadeh. Welcome, Arameh. Thank you so much for being part of this project. It's historic, I feel like, to have 4 people running for president-elect, and I'm so excited that I'm here to talk to you and that I can bring your voice to all the folks here in the Amplifier community.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for inviting me to the Amplify community. And I'm excited. I'm excited to talk, and I'm excited that there are multiple people on the slate so that everyone can hear and listen and learn and perspectives and all the things. So let's do that.
Yeah, it's been great. And so I always like to start with a little bit of background. You know, we talked briefly before this that, you have quite the extensive background of being the current VP of AOTA, founder of COTAD, or co-founder.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Oh my God. What? What about myself? Let's see. I am an occupational therapist now of 17, 18 years. I don't even know. I'm a lover of occupation and an ambassador for what we do. I am an Angelino. I am a lefty Leo. I am a mother of two. My main occupation right now is breastfeeding. Where all are my breastfeeders at? I am an mobilizer. I am an organizer. I am a believer in change. I am a doer. That is the foundation of occupation, right? We do, we become. And so I believe that in all the spaces that I occupy, I should do and become. And so I am a person who is a gate opener. And that is a little bit about myself.
That's quite the occupational profile, right? Is what they say.
I can go on, but I don't know how much you want me to brag. No, I'm just kidding. Uh,
No, that's
hard part.
perfect.
It's a hard question to ask because I have so many parts of who I am that make me who I am, so many intersectionalities that make me who I am, so many stories and narratives that make me who I am, and lived experiences that it's hard to pull. But I am a lover of occupation and a lover of people.
So, why are you running for AOTA president and why right now?
Yeah. And listen, I'm running because it's time for a change. I'm running because we need to steer this ship upwards. I am running because there is so much opportunity for this time of transition, right? There's opportunity. Like, I really legit feel like this is the most important election in years, right? You're voting for a president, you're voting for a vice president, you have a new executive director coming in, you have that leadership shift, one that will be creating the tide of the direction that we're going, right? And so we need somebody in there that is visionary, not only that has vision, but understands how to execute that vision, right? And so we know somebody who's prepared to do this work because, what I've done, my 17, 18 years of being in this field is volunteer leadership and volunteer service, right? I've given of myself my entire career. And also, like, there's so much opportunity right now with renewing and reboosting and shifting and changing our mission, our vision, our strategic plan. Hello. Like, I was literally talking about our mission and I read it to someone. I was like, first of all, do you know our mission? Like, even Clarice, do you know our mission by heart?
No. I'll be honest, I do not.
Like, how are we inspired by that? How are we identifying who we are through that? How are we guiding the actions of the association by that, right? And like when you look at our vision, like how are we like it's vision 2025 is about to be here. Like it's 24. When you blink, 25 is here. So like what are we envisioning for the future of who we are? Like, and currently our mission and vision, like what are the action steps to help us accomplish it? What are the ways of holding each other accountable by not accomplishing it, right? So you need somebody asking these questions to get us aligned in thinking about the future, right? And then our strategic plan, like we need a strategic plan. Like, Clarice, you should be able to go on the website. You should be able to access it, see it, understand it, digest it, see what the priorities are of the association, which helps drive the profession, right? So that's not really there. And you need somebody who like really believes in this type of transparency, right? Who is a voice for the people. And so I am that person. And so I believe that I have the stamina, I have the tenacity, I have the vision, I have the dedication, I have all the things. And more importantly, why now is because it is time for all the change to happen based on all the things I just shared. You need somebody to take us there. So I'm excited and I want to continue serving our community. I want to continue serving our students, our occupational scientists, our occupational therapy practitioners, from OTs to OTAs. And so that's just a constant thread of who I am.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you where you can feel that shift. And you're right, there is a lot of change in leadership that's coming up, including the executive director. And I feel like you can really feel that even within our larger community, United States, and within our OT profession of how you can feel there's an unease of where are we going to go? What's going to be next? And so I think when you're talking about making those improvements, if you could be like the president of the United States, what would be like your day one priorities for AOTA as the next president?
So this is a good question because you're asking particularly, and I think people get these things confused sometimes when they think about it. You're particularly asking about the association. And I think people want to see like, what are those day one priorities for the profession? It does connect, but like I could say, we need to be a household name. We need to be, but that's for the profession, right? We need to have these campaigns and be OT champions. That's for the profession, right? And we need to make sure that we're visible and we're viable. That's for the profession. You're asking about the day one for the association,
Mhm.
for AOTA. And I believe the reason why we have so many people who are disconnected is because there's a lack of transparency. And when I talk about lack of transparency, I want to be very clear what I mean. I mean, there's a lack of transparency in how governance is done.
Mhm.
There's a lack of transparency and unclarity on how the bylaws are implemented and when they are implemented. There is a culture right now that can feel like there's a lack of belonging, right? There is a decrease in membership and you have to ask why? And so it all goes back to this idea of what building trust looks like, right? Like yesterday was the president-elect
Town halls,
conversation.
yeah.
I'm the BP. I shouldn't have had to dig through link, through link, through link, through link to that centered in it's an
Mhm.
important election on the website. Or how about we have people like you who are entrepreneurs, right? How do we lean into that? So like we just don't have, I'm just talking about the website for example, stock photos, like show the people doing the occupations. And more
Mhm.
importantly, we must highlight the staff doing the incredible work. You are a fieldwork student with Heather Parsons,
Mhm.
like her and her team and the regulatory and government affairs team are doing some legit work.
Oh,
That
yeah.
should be blasted so people understand our membership value, our consumer value, what we do at the Hill, what we're doing for you, advocating, but we don't, right? So this lack of transparency, this lack of knowledge, this lack of clarity in how bylaws are done, this strategic plan that doesn't really show the priorities of getting us aligned in an order where staff, board, and members know the priorities. This is what disconnects us, right? And
Yeah.
it all boils down to transparency and clarity. But so for me, you need a president that has this vision that understands what's disconnecting us and bring us back together. Isn't that what OT is? It's the doing, it's the belonging, it's connection, right?
Mhm.
And so day one priorities for that is to shift that culture so that we can start reconnecting again, remembering why we fell in love with this profession.
Yeah.
Because when you get that in order, then baby, you can move mountains and we can get in order with what we want to tell the masses about who we are. People don't also understand like what I feel like you asked about the United States. I feel like oftentimes people don't even understand how like governance is in the United States, let alone in AOTA. Right?
Yes, I can testify to that.
Like I think people think AOT is all this, but we're really
Mhm.
this, right? And so we have to re-educate people on like what we do, what we don't do, but also like what AOTA is for. And I think that a lot of times like people think like the board is like it's for volunteer leaders, and so I feel like teams like the VLTC, Rebecca's governance team, like wonderful, wonderful leaders, but also they are doing some wonderful work in like creating onboarding processes. And I
Yeah.
was saying this, like you could be a volunteer leader, and maybe year one, you're like year two, finally year three, you're like, "Ah, this is what my role is. This is what I'm doing. Where was my onboarding? Where was my mentorship?" And by that time, it's like your time is up. So
Mhm.
you're constantly like, so we like get people onboarded, get us going, get us emotion, get us aligned. Can you imagine the diversity in thinkers and representation that's at the table if we just
Mhm.
kind of have this kind of space of alignment? So things I would love to do, a lot of
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah. No, and I think that really translates well into our next question of, in your opinion, what do you believe is the primary role and mission of AOTA in that bigger bubble of our profession?
Hmm. We are keeping our profession alive. You know what I mean? Like without AOTA, it's like our profession can literally like shrink, which is
Mhm.
why membership is so important, right? We have the people like the regulatory and government affairs advocating on behalf of us daily, day in and day out on
Right.
state and national levels to ensure that we are a reimbursable profession, to ensure that we are viable, to ensure that we are sustainable. So like AOT's role is really being the voice for who we are and to make sure that no one encroaches on that, right? To make sure that we are advocates, to make sure that we are champions. And I feel like we need to steer ourselves to remember, what the purpose of what AOTA is serving as a profession. And I want to be very clear that we are membership based
Mhm.
and we cannot forget the members. You know, like we can't run as a ink, without bringing in the voices of the members, without hearing the voices of the members, right? Our role is also to serve our members, right? And so our members are so critical and important, and our members' voices diverse voices should be included and should be heard. And so once you can bring that to the table, then we become stronger, and
Yeah.
we need to become stronger to position ourselves to be a force in not just the healthcare profession, but just to be a force, right?
Yeah.
Like people should know OT. And so I go back to what I said before, like we have the opportunity to reboot our
Hmm.
mission. Like you say, you don't know our mission by heart, but I do. And really, it really is about advancing OT. This is what it is: advancing OT practice, education, and research through standard setting and advocacy on behalf of its members, the profession, and the public. When I read that, I'm like, okay, cool. What does that mean? So for me, when we can come together with these diverse voices and recreate and redevelop and our mission and our vision, game time.
Yeah. And I think, again, you're leading right into all my questions. You've already
Oh,
touched on this, that you
we
believe
had
that, for sake, yes, you believe that membership in AOTA is important. And I'd love for you to explain why you think it's important, and maybe also what you would say to someone who does not want to be a member.
like membership is it's a membership based organization. Like being a member is your voice.
Hmm.
I always say this in my advocate one back because I've been doing this thing for a minute. Like I started statewide. Like you got to know your state. You got to know. You have to understand the governance even in your state. When I was a part of OTAC leadership, which is our California association, like we were part of advocacy. And I would tell people, like, okay, listen, if we were going to the Hill and we were saying, listen, there are 10 OTs, OTAs in California, and this is what we want to do. Or we'd be like, there are, I'm just arbitrary number, 100,000, that we're representing. We have the ears. We can, people,
Hmm.
we have the power. And with power in numbers, right? And in togetherness, we create change. How do we duplicate that so that everyone understands their power and their voice, right? So that everyone understands our role in advocacy, so that everyone recognizes that their membership holds value. The issue is that we're not showing them with that value. And based on what I said, why we're so disconnected, no one wants to be a part of a membership-based organization that doesn't even stick to their role and their priorities, right? So it's opportunity to show our members again their value, that we feel like they belong, but also to remind our members, which were non-members, how we can form and create community to be together and why having community is so important. Because we say we want to be a household name, but how are we a household name when we're all not members of an association that's keeping the lights on, right? You know what I mean? When we think about the other professions, ABA, speech, PT, who is advocating? We're doing it in our own spaces that we occupy, but they're doing it on the Hill. So membership is critical because it gives us the power to say, this is why OT, this is why our profession is so necessary. This is why our profession is so like important, significant. This is why, call me cheesy. I don't know, Clarice. I feel like OT changes the world. This is why we change the world. And so you asked me this, like, why should people like what do I tell people about renewing their membership, right?
Yeah, for
It's
someone
'cause,
who
like,
doesn't want to be a member.
yeah, it's like, okay, I get it. I understand. Like, I understand why you could be disgruntled, especially now in this climate, right? But also like you can't be disgruntled if you're not at the table. Like, get here. So we can start, like, I'm a believer in walking the talk, Clarice. So like let's get
Hmm.
here. Let's walk that talk together.
Yeah.
Let me hear you so that we can really create change. But the thing about it, we are so status quo and we lack so much transparency that this is why people are like, "Ah, I'm going to stay away." But if we can rip that apart and unmask and just be real, then I do believe that people will be re-inspired and be reconnected. So renew. It's a time of change. It's a time of great opportunity. It's a time of electing the leaders who can lead.
That's right. Yep. It's a time to get involved. And yeah, that old phrase, right, of if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's important to have your voices heard and have those two perspectives. It always takes those grassroots advocacy efforts with the grass tops advocacy efforts.
Yeah, and I think people are just uninspired. So they're like, I'm cool being on the menu right now because like me being at the table, like, what does it matter? And so for me, it's like we got to remind people why it's important to be at the table.
In the last workforce survey, it showed that 25% of practitioners are considering leaving the field of
Mhm.
occupational therapy. And we also had last year that AOTA had a 7% drop in membership. So do you think these issues are related? And also, in your opinion, what is kind of the best way to address them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question, right? Because leaving the field and leaving membership are like, they can have two different, like,
Mm-hmm.
it can be connected. It's like layers to this, right? It's no constant thing that's saying, yeah, well, obviously, if you're leaving the field, you're not going to renew your membership. Or you can be leaving the field because it's not, someone like you, you're an entrepreneur. You're doing something that's different. How is it reimbursable? How are you able to survive? But what are we doing as an association to say, no, 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 we need to center this. We need to elevate this. We need to show that there's different and unique and dynamic ways to still be an occupational therapist and have these skills, but do it in different ways. Like you should no longer be someone that's non-traditional, right? We have grassroots organizers. We have the people who are doing things underground, like our pelvic floor crew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
they're massive, right? But like also having to figure out ways to be reimbursable. So you're like, well, I love this. This is where we should be prioritizing. This is what we should be doing, but I can't live. I can't survive. So I'm going to find another niche, which is called something else, because I can utilize these other skills that my own profession isn't prioritizing or isn't capitalizing on or isn't making sure that there's a lane, right? And so there's opportunity again with diverse voices to say, let's come to the table and make these lanes and make these lanes very clear so that we can do the things that we want. We can stay in this profession. We can be proud AOTA members and we can be visible, you know?
Right.
So it's all about visibility. Like how are we making someone like you and many other people who are entrepreneurs visible, and showing like, this is OT. And so I do believe, also that a lot of things are related and down to like your core values,
Mm-hmm.
and if we feel like we've left membership, that the core values are no longer aligned, then people have the right to drop their membership, right? If they are disgruntled because they don't see themselves within the association and represent it, then they can drop their membership, right? That is them
Mm-hmm.
using their voice. And so it's about, again, how many times I have to say this? You're creating connection. It's about creating community. It's about not just saying, oh, yeah, we believe in belonging, but it's about really actually creating belonging. I'm at the table. Do I feel like I belong all the time? Are there incredible more barriers that I feel like I come across? Yes. You know, can I empathize and lean in to others who may share these similar stories? Yes. Is it something that someone should be dealing with privately and isolated and quietly and feel like they're the only ones dealing with it? No. So this is why, people want to feel like I can feel the leadership. I can connect with the leadership. I can understand what they're doing and the priorities that they have. And I can see what the association direction that association is clearly going because there's some transparency. Dang it, I really feel like they're aligned to my core values. I'm going to renew my membership.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to become a member. Oh, I just graduated. Okay, I don't have to be a member anymore because I'm no longer a part of a academic program because, a lot of academic programs, have you be
Yeah,
members.
require it. Yeah.
I can make my choices. No, I want the new grad to say, I'm going to be a lifelong member. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? But so many people are re-inspired to become members for this election. You know what I mean? So many people are. And so it's about re-inspiring, it's about momentum building, and it's about showing people that their membership truly matters.
Yeah.
Okay? It truly matters. And without members, we can't get the work done.
Mm-hmm. That's
Okay?
definitely true.
Can't get the work done, period. And the staff can't prioritize and get the work done. And so why people are leaving this profession or not joining this profession is a conversation in itself.
Oh, yeah. I think we could talk for
Reinvite
hours.
me, Clarice. Reinvite me.
And so, is it fair to say, if I'm picking up on a theme here, that transparency is really one of those number one objectives that is in your mind is kind of things we need to work on? So, the transparency, building that community, and you've mentioned, and the strategic vision, is that kind of a fair way to kind of summarize
I mean,
your mission?
yeah, But I want to be clear, like, I feel like people drop the word transparency because it's a cool and catchy word to drop now,
Hmm.
but like it's empty. Like, you can't just be like, I want to increase transparency. How? In what? You know?
Hmm.
And I really want to be clear, like in our governance, how we govern this association and in our bylaws, you know, that's a start in making sure that people can trust the work of the organization. And secondly, is how we communicate this.
Hmm.
Like, we can do all the wonderful things, but if it's not communicated, perception will run wild, right? So we have to have transparency. And I'm not saying like you need to know like what shirt I'm wearing every day. Like, I'm not gonna be that transparent. You know what I mean? But I'm saying like you can't bury something incredibly important in the bottom of a newsletter that can change the trajectory of what this association looks and feels like during the holidays and expect people not to feel a way about the information that they eventually find.
Yeah. And you've touched on this, you know, when you're talking about not feeling like you belong at that table or things and facing those barriers. That's a common thing that I hear from a lot of people who are in leadership positions, things that I've felt before, right? Is that not feeling like you deserve to be there or not feeling ready, that kind of imposter syndrome, right? So what,
Yeah, that's different.
yeah, all sorts of things. Like, so what advice would you give to someone who's interested in volunteering or taking on a leadership role?
Yeah, here's the thing about imposter syndrome. Like, I say, like, remove it immediately, especially from my minoritized communities or my new grads or whatever. Like, get it out of there because sometimes when you are at these tables, like, you're not the imposter. You're not the imposter. You're the person with heart. You're the person with actual substance behind the work that you do. You're the person who's not taking up space just because it's a title. You're the person who really wants to get down and do the work. There's others who you might think, oh, they really are the ones. No, no, no. They might be the imposters, right? But it just doesn't look like it or feel like it because we're so trained to feel like we should have imposter syndrome. No,
Mhm.
no. You belong. But the way the barriers are put in place and the way they make experiences for certain people versus others make you question if you belong. And so, cool, question it, but don't internalize it.
Mhm.
Right, Clarice? And so
Yeah.
we have to say, yeah, you know what? You need to go volunteer. Because when I talk to students all across this country, I say, you are at the point in your career in your life where you can say yes to opportunity. Say
Mhm.
yes. Because no one, I say like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna graduate and I'm gonna become the president of AOTA. I knew 17 years ago that and no shade to the people who do this, I knew that I didn't want to go to work and just come home and watch
Mhm.
housewives here. But to be honest, my point is that I always wanted to be involved, be engaged, and I wanted to serve, right? And so when I got tapped on the shoulder, I got to give a shout out to Laura Wu, who I was working for CCS and I was in pediatrics. And she was like, hey, would you be interested in being the newsletter co-editor of our students, the newsletter co-editor? Like, I was like, Crystal, I've
Mhm.
never been a newsletter editor. Co-editor, like, what is, I said, yes. I said, sure, absolutely, yes. Because there was no co-tag. There was no like space where I had my people, where I found my village. At the time when I graduated, they didn't say, yeah, you must be involved in AOTA or OTAG. Like, they didn't take me by the hand and mentor me and say, I've already been at a conference. These students today they've been to conferences. They've
Mhm.
done conference presentations. They've been none of that. I had to find my way. So I said yes because I wanted to be engaged. And then I continued to say yes and to yes and to yes and to yes and just continue to serve and continue to lift other leaders, like up and coming leaders up with me until where now I'm here. And yes, as you get higher, it feels more isolated. Your village has to become tighter. You have to know who your people are,
Mhm.
but that all comes with preparation, Clarice. That all comes because 17 years ago, I said yes.
Yeah.
Then when I got into AOTA leadership, someone said, you should really consider the RA. And I was already very much involved in OTAC. And I was like, the RA, what is that? You know? Like, and I'm an involved person. Imagine somebody who's not involved. I was like,
Mhm.
I became the California rep for 2 terms, 2 terms representing Cali. And so then I continued to branch off and get more involved in committees and task force and learning the inner workings of like what we represent and who we are,
Mhm.
right? to where I can say and comfortably say, I am prepared because I said yes to volunteering and taking a leadership role. I didn't let fear, and I could have been like, be fearful, but that's okay. Be uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Like, Clarice, I'm sure you didn't say 2 years ago, what year are we in? Maybe 3 now, that you were gonna quit my 9 to 5 and I'm going to start a podcast and do all these educational things and really change the trajectory. Like, you didn't graduate probably and say, like,
Yeah.
this is Amplify OT,
Would have told you were crazy. Yeah.
and you got to be so committed to your greatness and to the legacy that you want to lead and to the influence that you want to make to say, I'm going to do it anyway. It could be through volunteerism. It could be through entrepreneurism. It could be through grassroots, whatever thing that you do, but find the gap and like bridge that,
Yeah.
and you could start with volunteer work.
I think that's such an amazing commonality that so many leaders share is that, and you'll hear that throughout even the different interviews with president-elects that we're doing, that it's always seems to start with someone who has put some belief in you and asked you to participate. That's how I've gotten involved in a number of the things that I've done. And I always think that's such a fascinating connector of that. It's that outreach that someone has kind of
Lift you
called
up.
on you to participate.
Call on you. And it's our responsibility to recognize that's a call and say yes. Because we're so fear based. We're so like, I don't want to get uncomfortable. We're so in our bubble that if we miss the call, you miss the trajectory,
Hmm.
right? So say yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. The very last question is, of course, why should someone vote for you?
Why not? No, I don't know. You can keep that in, but no, vote for me because like I understand the climate that we're in and I recognize where we need to go. And through, you could be a visionary, you could have these ideas, but you have to be able to bring people along the way to believe in it, right? To want to implement it, to believe in the mission and the vision of where you want to take the association and the profession, right? You have to have somebody, who has tenacity, who has
Yeah.
experience, but more importantly, who has been through something, right? Like, here's the thing. I say this, my 2-year-old, like, yeah, it's cute. Like, people say you want a bold and confident leader, right? Listen, Clarice, my 2-year-old is bold and confident. This boy will jump off the couch, do a freewheel 360 flip, and is very bold and confident about that. Yes, you need a bold and confident leader, but you also need someone who has the stamina to get through a challenge, the tools of understanding what being an authentic leader is, and the tools of understanding how to navigate through struggles. Because what comes with leading are the challenges and the circumstances. And we need to have the stamina to know how to pivot and strength and understand and emotional intelligence to get through, right? And so you need someone who's had some experience in that, right? And who wants to literally and truly create community. Like, not just talk about it, but like, and not just use belonging because it's the word of the year, but actually like infuse it in all the things that we do. And lastly, you should vote for me because all the spaces that I occupy are spaces because I'm constantly wanting to decrease barriers and increase access for any and everybody. And that's how you could connect a profession and the people that we serve.
Well, thank you so much, Arameh. I really appreciate your time and good luck with your campaign.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for creating this space for everyone to have a voice. Really appreciate you and the work that you're doing, and I just wish you all the success. Thank you, Clarice.
Hey, I'm Clarice, and I'm the founder of Amplify OT. And thank you so much for either watching this video or listening to the Amplify OT podcast. If you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to listen to all the different interviews. And of course, I encourage you to join our Amplifiers community at learn.amplifyot.com in order to continue this important conversation. You can now join the Amplify OT membership for free, or we have our full access passes. I have the link in the description for you, or you can go to learn.amplifyot.com. You can also join our community by downloading the Amplify OT app, now available on iOS devices. Our mission at Amplify OT is to make learning about policy easy so that you can engage in advocacy. And a key part of advocacy is voting, so I sincerely hope you participate in this year's AOTA elections. Voting opens on February 2nd, 2024 and closes on February 23rd at 11:59 a.m. Eastern Time. And as a reminder, you must be a member of AOTA as of January 2nd in order to vote, and you must also be an active member at the time that you cast your vote. So thank you again to all the candidates for participating in this project. It is so exciting to see this level of energy around this election. And of course, I hope you come back to Amplify OT to learn more about Medicare, billing, policy, and advocacy so that you can be the change that you want to see in our healthcare system and within our profession. Thanks so much again for watching, and don't forget to share this video so that others can hear what the candidates have to say. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the Amplify OT podcast on your favorite podcast app. Remember, if you don't advocate for occupational therapy, who will?